So unless you've been living under a rock, you know that on Wednesday, February 5th, Donald Trump was acquitted by the U.S. Senate in the impeachment trial and will continue to serve as president at least until the next election. And the chances are growing stronger that he will be reelected thanks to the turmoil within the Democratic Party and the obvious problems with the Iowa caucus. So, in the wake of that, somebody I know posted a thread where they wanted to discuss Mitt Romney's reasons for voting to convict Donald Trump on abuse of power, which was the first article of impeachment. And he got a lot of very adverse reactions. And I thought maybe I would do a breakdown of it. Now, he was arguing the whole time that it was a sound argument on the part of Mitt Romney, and that therefore he did not understand why a lot of the Trump fans were looking at Mitt Romney as some sort of turncoat, or that he was completely wrong. And in his opinion, he was completely right in his reasoning. So let's break down some of it. Obviously, not all of his interview with Chris Wallace was relevant. We're not going to get into his remarks from the floor because a lot of it went into his Mormon faith, which, look, I guess everyone can say what they believe in terms of, but you're impeaching a president. You're not impeaching the leader of the Latter-day Saints Church or whatever. So here we go. This is the part where they actually talk about the witnesses.
And turn them all into statutes and say it's illegal to do the following things. This is a circumstance where it's hard for me to imagine a more serious attack on the Constitution and on a republic like ours than saying that a president would be able to enlist a foreign government to corrupt our elections so that our president could keep in power. That's what happens in tin horn autocracies. It does not happen in the United States of America. And I felt without question that I had a responsibility, if I was going to honor the oath I made before God, to vote what I believed was right. And by the way, I trust my colleagues in the...
So that's what he did vote to convict Trump on, abuse of power, meaning that when Trump apparently discussed with Volodymyr Zelensky a pending investigation of Joe Biden, Mitt Romney is credulous of the fact that this was, first of all, a quid pro quo, and second was some sort of attempt to derail a political opponent's campaign. Now, let's listen to some of the rest of his rationale, because it starts to sort of diverge, in my opinion.
The Senate did exactly the same thing, that they followed their conscience as they understood it. I don't argue with them. I reached my own decision without deliberation with them, but I'm absolutely convinced that this is exactly right, at least in my heart.
So this was a part that I thought was very strange, that Mitt Romney was apparently claiming that he reached his deliberation without any consultation of any of his Senate colleagues. So are we really to believe that he was sitting in the jury quarters or wherever that they sit in the Senate and listening to this trial for days on days? He didn't speak to any of the other people in the chamber, whether it was Susan Collins or Lisa Murkowski or maybe Chris Coons on the Democratic side, any of the other people. I find it very difficult to believe that this would happen. And also, it is pretty unusual. Think about a jury trial. Usually the jury will discuss their opinions with each other while deliberating. That's really part of what the jury is, that they're supposed to, in a criminal trial. Obviously, we're talking about different circumstances here, but there was no reason for Mitt Romney to have been sitting by himself, thinking about this by himself, as if someone else's ideas would have contaminated his own judgment. Typically, that's what juries do. You deliberate with your colleagues. And therefore, I find it very odd that he would stay. First of all, I don't believe him personally. I believe that he probably talked to a number of senators from both parties. And it is pretty difficult for me to believe that he sat there with no preconceived judgment. Because a lot of the senators who were entering the trial, they also made pathetic attempts to claim that they were being impartial or to attack other senators by claiming that they were not impartial enough, such as Mitch McConnell, trying to say, oh, Mitch McConnell is violating his role because you're supposed to swear an oath of impartiality, or they are supposed to go in with open judgment, and there's a whole procedure that they go through. In any case, then he starts talking more directly about the witnesses.
Why vote to acquit on the second article, the obstruction of Congress?
Congress should have pursued all legal avenues to receive the documents and the testimony that they wanted. And they didn't pursue that. The president took a legal recourse, and I don't believe that by virtue of taking legal recourse that is an impeachable offense. Let me note something, though, Chris, and that is I wanted to hear more witnesses. I wanted to hear John Bolton and Mick Mulvaney because I hoped they would say something that would raise a reasonable doubt, that would make it so I wouldn't have to vote to convict. It was extraordinarily important to me. I hope beyond hope, as you might imagine, that there would be evidence brought forward by the White House that would say he did not do the things that were alleged. And unfortunately, that never came forward.
You talk about the consequences. You realize this is war. Donald Trump will never forgive you for that.
So now Chris Wallace gets into more of the issues of the ramifications for Romney and his relationship with the rest of the GOP, which we're not going to go into. Maybe I'll talk about my own reaction at the end. But the basis for that is a little surprising. So Mitt Romney is saying that he does believe that Donald Trump committed an act that constitutes abuse of power. However, he does think that the House rushed through the impeachment, did not get the necessary legal documents and witness testimony in order to actually go through with the second article. So that's what he's saying about the second article. The second article is invalid, and therefore he did not vote to convict on it. However, he believes that the case is strong enough for abuse of power, even though in order to substantiate the case more, Adam Schiff was claiming that despite already having overwhelming evidence, they wanted to hear more witnesses. So this is something that's it is not practice when you're a prosecutor in a court of law. You don't call more witnesses once your case has already been proven. That just gives more wiggle room for the defense to impeach your witnesses and put doubt into the heads of the jury, especially in the United States. Obviously, in other countries, they don't use the trial by jury system. And this actually says here, this is the end of his remarks. It says the Constitution entrusts you to the responsibility to act as impartial jurors, to hold a fair and thorough trial and to weigh the evidence before you. No matter your political affiliation or your vote in the previous election or the next, your duty is to the Constitution and to the rule of law. The House believes that an impartial juror, upon hearing the evidence that the managers will lay out in the coming days, will find that the Constitution demands the removal of Donald J. Trump from his office as President of the United States. That was at the end. So he thinks that just the evidence from the House managers will compel them to remove the president from office. And then he said earlier, over the coming days, we will present to you and to the American people the extensive evidence collected during the House's impeachment inquiry into the president's abuse of power. Overwhelming evidence, notwithstanding his unprecedented and wholesale obstruction of the investigation into that misconduct. So think about it this way. He's saying, on the one hand, that he already has all the evidence in order to convict Donald Trump and remove him from office for abuse of power. However, he needs more witness testimony in order to establish abuse of power. So either he's established it or he hasn't. You can't claim that you already have the evidence necessary and then say that you need to gather more evidence. It's either you've met the threshold or you haven't. And that was a main contradiction during the trial, and it's one of the main issues. It sunk Schiff among many of the Republicans. And remember, in order to remove a president from office, which is what I believe, I don't think that Schiff really believed that he could get the GOP senators to remove Trump from office. I think that he thought he could draw a few offside and maybe prolong the trial and make it very embarrassing for the president. But removal was never going to happen. So what he was really attempting to do here was to rub this whole trial in the faces of the Senate and to put it in their court, put the ball in their court, and say to them, well, we've done everything we can to remove him, and therefore you're complicit in everything that he's doing and for leaving him in power. And you could say with that, maybe Schiff got what he wanted. But that does not mean that Donald Trump should have been found guilty and removed from office. Because what many people were saying to me was that, yeah, Alexander Vindman did say, the necessary testimony from firsthand knowledge from the transcript in order to convict Donald Trump, in order to remove him from office. Now, the fact is that Vindman denied time after time that he knew who the whistleblower was. But this incident happened during the impeachment hearings in the House with Congressman Nunes.
Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, did you discuss the July 25th phone call with anyone outside the White House on July 25th or the 26th? And if so, with whom?
Yes, I did. My core function is to coordinate U.S. government policy, interagency policy, and I spoke to two individuals with regards to providing some sort of readout of the call.
Two individuals that were not in the White House?
Not in the White House, cleared U.S. government officials with appropriate need to know.
And what agencies were these officials with?
Department of State, Deputy Assistant Secretary George Kent, who is responsible for the portfolio, Eastern Europe, including Ukraine, and an individual from the office of, an individual in the intelligence community.
As you know, the intelligence community has 17 different agencies. What agency was this individual from?
If I could interject here, we don't want to use these proceedings.
It's our time,
I know,
Mr. Chair.
but we need to protect the whistleblower.
Please stop.
I want to make sure that there's no effort to out the whistleblower.
So essentially, Nunes didn't even say the word whistleblower in that context. But Adam Schiff steps in and he says, well, who did you speak with? And Nunes was asking him what agency from among the American intelligence community was he or she working for? And Adam Schiff stops him. So if the person was not the whistleblower who Alexander Vindman claimed that he spoke with, and therefore, but he did speak with someone, and that someone was with an intelligence agency, then why would you have to invoke whistleblower protection? It's a clear sign that, first of all, Alexander Vindman did speak to the whistleblower, thereby meaning that he perjured himself in other parts of testimony, and also that Adam Schiff knows who the whistleblower is, but he pretends that he doesn't. It's some sort of peekaboo game that he continues to play with the American public.
Through the use of these proceedings. If the witness has a good faith belief that this may reveal the identity of the whistleblower, that is not the purpose that we are here for, and I want to advise the witness accordingly.
So again, I want to stress, how would Adam Schiff know, based on Nunes' question and based on the fact that he doesn't know who the whistleblower is? Schiff doesn't know who the whistleblower is. Apparently, Alexander Vindman, according to his own testimony, doesn't know who the whistleblower is. So based on Nunes' question, why would that out the whistleblower if Vindman didn't speak with him and Adam Schiff doesn't know who the whistleblower is? How did that audio cue suddenly trigger Adam Schiff to object to that question?
Vindman, you testified in your deposition that you did not know the whistleblower.
Ranking member, it's Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, please.
Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, you testified in the deposition that you did not know who the whistleblower was or is.
I do not know who the whistleblower is. That is
So how is it possible for you to name these people and then out the whistleblower?
Per the advice of my counsel, I've been advised not to answer specific questions about members of the intelligence community.
Are you aware that this is the Intelligence Committee that's conducting an impeachment hearing?
Of course I am.
Wouldn't the appropriate...
So the main fallout from this line of questioning was that Nunes called Vindman Mr. Vindman instead of Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, rather than the fact that Vindman was invoking some sort of protection for the whistleblower when he claims he doesn't know who the whistleblower is, and Schiff was doing the same thing. So this was a whole smokescreen that was being cast around Devin Nunes's questioning of Vindman, which showed pretty clearly that he was hiding something, and hiding something that was incriminating towards him, not incriminating towards, or sorry, not in order to protect the whistleblower. It was in order to cover his ass, because he would not admit that he knew the whistleblower.
appropriate place for you to come to testify would be the Intelligence Committee about someone within the intelligence community?
Ranking member, per the advice of my counsel and the instructions from the chairman, I've been advised not to provide any specifics on who I've spoken to inside the intelligence community. What I can offer is that these were properly cleared individuals, or was a properly cleared individual with a need to know.
Well, this is, I mean, you can plead the fifth, but you're here to answer questions, and you're here under subpoena. So you can either answer the question or you can plead the fifth.
Excuse me. On behalf of my client, we are following the rule of the committee, the rule of the chair with regard to this issue, and this does not call for an answer that is invoking the fifth or any theoretical issue like that. We're following the ruling of the chair.
Counselor, what ruling is that?
If I could interject, counsel is correct. Whistleblower has the right, statutory right to anonymity. These proceedings will not be used.
So again, he's claiming that this is going to out the whistleblower when in reality, if you don't know who the whistleblower is, and Schiff has said repeatedly since the beginning of the impeachment or since the middle of the impeachment proceedings, that he doesn't know who he is. So how would he know whether Vindman spoke to him? If Vindman doesn't know who the whistleblower is, which he said only a couple minutes ago, how would he be able to invoke this dodge in order to avoid answering the question? They don't answer that.
To out the whistleblower.
And I've advised my client accordingly, and he's going to follow the ruling of the chair. If there's an alternative or you want to work something out with the chair, that's up to you, Mr. Nunes.
Well,
So then let's look at Jim Jordan's questioning of Vindman regarding the same issue.
Period of time in there between when I spoke to him and when he circled back around. It wasn't that long a period of time, but it was enough time for me to...
Enough time to go to talk to someone that you won't tell us who it is.
So this was concerning the fact that Vindman never raised any of his concerns about the phone call to his superior officer, Tim Morrison. And therefore, this is where Jordan starts to figure out that he is lying about the timeline and about who he did tell and why he told them.
Who it is, right?
I've been instructed not to, Representative Jordan.
Well, here's what I'm getting. The lawyer told you don't talk to any other people, and you interpret that as not talking to your boss, but you talk to your brother, you talk to the lawyers, you talk to Secretary Kent, and you talk to the one guy Adam Schiff won't let you tell us who he is. Is that right?
Representative Jordan, I did my job.
I'm not saying you didn't. All I'm saying is.
So again, let me explain. Vindman had concerns about the call, supposedly, so he never aired those concerns to Tim Morrison, who was a superior officer, because apparently he said he was overloaded with work and he didn't have enough time to do it. But he did mention his concerns to people who were, such as his brother, who is not with security clearance at all. He raised those concerns with other people in the intelligence community, and he raised those concerns with a person who he can't even mention his name because of a whistleblower protection, even though he claims that he doesn't know who the whistleblower is.
The instructions from the lawyer was you shouldn't talk to anybody, and you interpret that as don't talk to my boss, but I'm going to go talk to someone that we can't even ask you who that individual is.
That is incorrect.
Well, I just read what you said.
That is
I shouldn't
incorrect.
talk to any other
The
people.
gentleman has expired.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chairman, but
Yes,
that
you may
sequence is not the way it played out. I
I'm
spoke
reading
to
from
the
your
attorney.
transcript, Colonel Vindman.
Mr. Jordan, please let Colonel Vindman answer.
There's the sequence played out where immediately afterwards I expressed my concerns. I did my coordination function. Mr. Eisenberg circled back around and told me not to talk to anybody else. In that period of time, I did not
Oh,
manage
so
to talk
that's
to you.
when it happened.
Mr.
That's
Heck,
when you
are
talked with someone.
recognized. Mr. Heck?
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So he expressed his concerns. He doesn't say he expressed the concerns with Tim Morrison, because he admitted prior to that moment that he didn't talk to Morrison about it. So he talked to his lawyer, Eisenberg, and Eisenberg advised him not to speak to anyone about it. He ended up speaking to a number of people. So yeah, Alexander Vindman's testimony is not really worth, it's not something that you can take and say, well, this is hard evidence against Donald Trump. Yes, he was on the call. Does his testimony match what the call said on the transcript? No. Does his testimony match what other colleagues said happened on the call? Not really. It doesn't match what Tim Morrison says happened on the call, and Tim Morrison testified. So this is a case of people choosing which witnesses to include and which witnesses to disregard solely based on their political belief. And it is because of the weakness of the Vindman testimony and the weakness of a lot of the other witnesses, like Volker and Sondland and Jovanovic, who didn't really have anything to contribute because she wasn't even there. It was a tremendous waste of time. It was a huge, huge, huge example of political theater that didn't really have a specific legal connection to a reason to convict the president. So, look, I know a lot of people won't accept the legitimacy of the Trump presidency. They don't accept that he was acquitted lawfully. They don't accept the fact that the underpinnings of the impeachment were very shaky and in many cases were non-existent. But look, tough luck. It's over. People who are saying that Mitt Romney is courageous, they didn't say the same thing. None of the people that I know who are saying this, I never saw any statement in support of Tulsi Gabbard's present vote during the impeachment vote in the House, when she said that the process was improper, that it was rushed, that it was partisan, that it was divisive. They didn't support any of the reasoning behind the two Democratic congressmen who broke with the House caucus, the House Democratic caucus, and they voted against impeachment. One of them ended up leaving the House Democratic caucus, Jeff Van Drew. So yeah, I think that these people are purely partisan. They can claim all they want that this is some sort of issue where they're only looking for the rule of law. But if it was so clear, then why again did they need more witnesses in the Senate? And why was there such a fight in order to get more witnesses? And then they decided to circumvent the court and include that second article that not even Mitt Romney voted for. So that's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also, please follow me on Gab at Starscream85, as well as on Subscribestar, as well as Minds.com and BitChute. Those are all at Chef Leopard. And I will talk to you later. Have a good night.